What's up guys, Intelitech Studios here, and today we're going to be doing the last video you're going to see on this Shark Navigator. Now this is the original Shark Navigator, the one with the multi-cyclone pack. I just sold this one on eBay about a day or two ago, and it's about time that I run it one last time before I clean it up and ship it out to the buyer. So I did do a demo on this a while ago, but I didn't actually do a full in-depth review on it. So it's about time that I finally did that. This is the first generation Navigator that originally released back in 2009, and this particular machine didn't actually run for all that long on the market from what I understand. Well, then again, now that I'm thinking about it, 2009 sounds way too recent. I want to say it was 2008. Actually, it might have been that. It's one of those 2 years that this came out. Now, this came out to replace the Infinity series of machines, and this is the first machine from Shark's lineup that was 100% branded Shark. And this was the machine that got it right, and finally turned Shark into a household name, and turned them into the brand that we know and love today. So this particular example is the first gen Navigator with the, as I mentioned, with the Cyclone pack. It's a very similar color to what would eventually come on the Navigator Liftaway NV352, as this is the NV22 model. That machine got rid of this multi-cyclone pack, but it was incredibly successful as it introduced the liftaway function, which was a ripoff of Bissell and, well, Cibo, but more so Bissell's liftoff technology from the 90s. Shark copied that and turned it into a machine that ended up being very well marketed and very decently performing. Some of those machines were even CRI certified at one point. This machine wasn't, but it has a very similar, in fact, a nearly identical power head to what would later come on the Navigator liftaways. So this particular machine is one of the best cleaning Sharks that you can still get, and it's definitely going to be one of the best filtering Sharks, at least in terms of the pre-motor filtration. Now this is before they introduced a HEPA filter. You've got just a basic pad filter, and as you can see, it discolors very easily, so it's definitely recommended that you change this. So you don't have any HEPA filtration, but you do still have a sealed system, very similar vein to the Navigator Liftaway, although this might not officially be a sealed system. But at the time, it would come with some extra pet tools like a turbo brush, and I have used that turbo brush before. I have one somewhere. It actually is an okay turbo brush, but it's nothing really special. But the other two attachment tools are on board, and we'll talk about those in just a sec. Now, right off the bat, we're going to talk about one of the biggest issues that I have found with this machine when actually using it, and that's how top-heavy it is. Sharks don't have this problem as much anymore, but back then you can see how long and narrow this machine is. If you tug on the cord or you tug on the hose, this machine will topple over, and it will topple over very aggressively. So that is something to keep in mind. You got to be careful, as these do tend to tip over. Now, one way that Shark tried to prevent that is by putting the hose down on this little hook. So the hose is not built into the handle like it is on the later units. This is a completely separate hose, and this hose is not the best quality. It tends to dry rot after a while, and these tabs do love to break. This tab is actually broken, and the bin release latch, they also tend to break, which one of them is snapped. Now, one little issue with this bin design, which first off, you push this button right up here to pop this off. It gets very stiff, but one little issue with this bin design is this little baffle they have in here. Now, this baffle doesn't actually really seem to do anything, but it does lead to a lot of debris getting stuck in here, which can be a little frustrating. There's not a lot of capacity in here, which I'm perfectly fine with. I don't mind having small capacities for bagless machines because I usually empty them after every use anyways. And as you can see, the Cyclone is actually, it looks very similar to what we find on a modern Shark, but it's upside down and it feeds into an entire Cyclone pack. And then as you can see, the exits of those cyclones then go down into these tubes that go past the bottom seal, where it then goes into the filters. So it's actually not a terrible design, although it does restrict airflow a fair bit because you're sending air down many different paths back and forth. But as you can see, you can actually open this entire Cyclone pack and you get access to all the cyclones. So it's actually very easy to wash out one of these cassettes, which is very nice because they do tend to clog up pretty easy, but this one actually washes up pretty good. There's a couple bits of hair in it from the time I've used it, but it's much easier to disassemble than something like a Dyson, and doesn't require any tools unlike a lot of the machines from TTI. So that is a nice little feature. I really wish Shark would go back to this design, because clearly they're capable of doing it, and to make their machines a lot more efficient and a lot better filtering. Because if you combined this with a HEPA filter that the newer machines have and a proper sealed system, this would actually be a killer combo. And it also helped the sealed system because the filters wouldn't be overloaded with dust and it wouldn't be causing the warping that happens on a lot of newer sharks. So this thing filters very well for a shark, and it makes sense because it's the only one with proper multi-cyclonic separation. You have the same shroud as before, but it's a lot better protected, even if the actual shroud isn't as well made as the newer ones. So that's nice. And yeah, that's pretty much the bin. And you can also, as you can see, you can open it from both sides as well, which is really nice because there is that extra little bit of accessibility. So again, one of the big selling points of this machine back when it was new was being able to easily disassemble and access the Cyclone and wash it, something an end consumer can do to maintain the machine. It's a great feature, and it's one of my favorite aspects of this older shark. Now we've also got some couple washable filters. Now these are very similar to what we find on a modern shark. You've got the two pieces, so you've got the main sponge that does most of the heavy lifting, and in this one you've actually got two sponges, which again, very, very good filtration. And then of course you have one of the pads. These like to deteriorate after a while, so it's recommended that you change these. But having basically 3 filters before you go to the motor is a fantastic design because, yes, again, it does restrict airflow a little bit, but again, you've got so many more stop gaps. With a lot of the newer sharks, there is very little getting in the way of the dust and the motor, which on this one, you've got multiple layers of filters, so the thing will actually lose suction before you start sending debris through the motor, which is the way it should be, because you're not killing the machine. And that's why this machine is still running after, 16 years, whereas most sharks don't last near that long. A lot of newer sharks are still burning out, but this one doesn't have that problem. Although it would be nice if I could take this little cassette out, like on some of the newer ones, and just wash everything. But either way. And like I said, you've got that pre-motor filter. If this was a HEPA filter, that would be perfect, because this would be the best filtering shark that you could get. You can see this just hinges back onto this little point. Even has a little diagram there. There's a little bit of hair sticking out of that one. Then, once we're done with that, we just pop that in any particular orientation, doesn't really matter. And then just pop it shut. So, very nice, very easy. Again, some of these clamps and some of these release latches are a little stiff after many, many years. But, you can see you can still click that back together. And that's all fine and dandy. You've also got a nice big beefy carrying handle right here, and the machine isn't actually all that tall. It's pretty typical with most machines, so picking it up and carrying it, it is still a lot heavier and a lot denser than some other machines like some of the competing Dysons. Some of the competing Dysons of the time feel, a little bit more balanced, even if they are technically heavier. And this does still have some handle weight problems, but it's not nearly as bad as the newer sharks. This thing weighs hardly anything in the hand, despite having the motor above the main cleaner head. It's definitely the most easily to handle shark. That's not right words. It's the wow. It is the best shark to use in terms of handle weight. There we go. That's more like it. Now again, the power head's very much identical to the still currently available NV352s. We've got the side-mounted hose, which isn't ideal, but it gets the job done. Now unfortunately, this hose is not easily removable, so if this does split, you can't officially replace it, but if you get one of the ones from the lift away and you pull off the end of it, you can actually thread this in and replace it that way. I've done that a bunch of times on these, so it is definitely doable. You've got your indicator light to show you when there's a brush jam, and you've got a very standard brush roll, which again, actually does a fairly decent job. Now, this would have... Oh my god, did I forget the wheels? Oh goodness. I forgot the wheels. Dang it. Anyways, so, there is our brush roll, which this one actually cleaned up pretty good. And surprisingly, the bearings are still good in this. Like, it didn't actually have any problems. But you can get third-party replacements of these. You're not going to get any parts from Shark anymore, but there's still enough of a demand for these machines that you can find some third-party parts. Not as much as the lift away, but a lot of the parts are interchangeable from the cleaner head and other things. You got these really nice rubber-coated wheels, and when they exist, there's rubber-coated wheels up here as well. And there's actually counterweights in this cleaner head because there's no proper height adjustment. So there's counterweights in here to force the cleaner head down into the carpet, which this machine actually cleans a lot better with those wheels removed. So that is one thing that I've noticed, although it can scratch your floors, obviously, without the wheels in place. So, as far as the tools go and the cord, this has a 25-foot cord like a lot of the other Sharks. Again, wish it was a little bit longer, but I can at least tolerate a 25-foot cord. You do have a hose wand, and you can pull the entire wand off just like that, or you can grab just the hose and pop that off, which is really nice. Unlike a lot of the newer Sharks, you're not forced to use a terrible handle. This is just a hose, and you just hold it and use it. Very nice. And there's little holes in here because there were some attachments that would utilize them, but it's also there for airflow as well. Now, again, they can split right here where all these bends are, so you got to be careful. But on board, you got the exact same dusting brush as the later liftaways, and this does swivel. It's a decent brush, but it's a bit too big and also too small at the same time. But it does work. Now, there does exist an ecosystem of these where you can get different tools. Like I mentioned, there's that turbo brush, and there's some newer turbo brushes as well. And there's also an extra long crevice tool that you can get for this. And you can also find other wands and stuff for these as well, so you can upgrade them. You've also got this really skinny crevice tool, which the previous owner clearly didn't even know was here because they never used it. But you do have this crevice tool as well, which, although it's very small, it is a decent crevice tool. It's just way too small. That's kind of the main problem with it. But it actually does work pretty okay, and I'm sure it being too small isn't too much of an issue because, again, there is the giant extra long crevice tool that you can get with these. And with that crevice tool, you can get into a lot of different areas. And that does clip right on board, although, again, you gotta be careful. Sometimes people lose those, as they're not very easy to see. There's no upholstery tool on board, but there do exist upholstery tools that you can get for these, and, you know, I've used them before. They're pretty decent. Now, of course, the hose does lend itself to the tipping problem that I mentioned earlier, and that's why there's this little guard in place that allows you to hook the hose down and keep it out of the way, because otherwise it does tip. Now, it can still tip with this, and the hose doesn't actually move a lot in here. It actually clamps down onto the hose, so it does remove some of your reach. But you can actually reach a fair amount. I actually forgot to test if this will reach up a flight of stairs, so I'm going to do that real quick. So I just confirmed, when you have the hose out of the hook and you've got the swivel thing kicked up all the way towards the top, like that, where it's coming out of the top, this actually does, you can tell I'm out of breath from climbing the stairs. This actually does reach all the way up a traditional 13-flight set of stairs, or at least it reaches up to the 12th, just barely, but it does with the wand on. So that actually is pretty impressive. It pretty much matches a Dyson, which, yeah, for at the time, much cheaper alternative, is pretty impressive. Now, of course, Shark later decided to shorten the hose and go with the lift-away feature instead. But if you liked having the machine that sat at the bottom of the stairs that could stretch all the way to the top in a similar vein to Phantom and Dyson, this would have been your best option at the time. Alright, and now for the last time that you're going to see this machine on this channel before it goes to its new home. So, to use the Shark Navigator, it's very similar to a lot of modern Sharks. You've got a rocker switch, and thankfully this was before the major design flaw that hit a lot of the modern Sharks. You've got a 2-position switch. 1 is for bare floor, and 2 is for carpet. Although note, as a safety feature, the Shark only engages the brush roll when the cleaner head is reclined, and you push on the front of it. Just, Rocco! What are you doing? Get out of my stuff. I'm trying to do a video. You're interrupting me. Anyways, so this works just like a modern Shark does. So you would Rocco, stop walking underneath me. So you grab your foot and you put it down just like that. No swivel neck on this model, although they later did make iterations with swivel necks. Although I'm failing to remember if there was a version with the Cyclones that had the swivel neck. I want to say there was, but that could be wrong. But yeah, and of course you would press this button for floors, and then again for carpets, and you've got that green... What is wrong with people? And then you've got this to turn it on. Unfortunately, this is one of those machines that I'm actually regretting selling now that I'm using it again, because I actually do quite like using this machine on carpets. It actually does do a fairly solid job. It's definitely the best performing Shark that they've ever put out. And considering it was the first one, yeah, they definitely got it right the first time. Because again, some of the lift-away machines with the same cleaner head design were actually CRI approved for a little bit. So this machine does clean well on certain types of carpet. Of course, there's no height adjustment, so it's not going to do good on deep pile. But on low pile, on a somewhat medium pile, you can definitely get by with it. But yeah, and this was also before they added a suction control slider to the hose. But yeah, you do still have that full power. And on the bright side, though, I'm not too bothered by selling this because you can still find these, believe it or not. I would love to find one of the Walmart exclusive blue models, the one that Phantom Lightning had back in the day, because I'm quite fond of this color. Although this very, very iridescent lavender is quite beautiful as well. So I actually do quite like this machine, despite how strange it is. And I generally kind of miss this era of Shark whenever, yes, this design had problems. There were issues with hoses splitting, and there were still some premature motor failures with these, but generally speaking, they didn't have the massive amount of reliability issues that Sharks tend to have today. And Shark could have easily, and that's the thing, is Shark is undoubtedly a very successful company, so it doesn't really matter what I think. The fact is that consumers are still buying modern Sharks, regardless of how terrible they've become, especially compared to this. This was a good vacuum. It genuinely is. And it's such a shame, because this genuinely kind of marked an era when a true Dyson competitor finally emerged. And of course, the rest is history. Nowadays, Shark outsells Dyson like, what, 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or something like that. It's ridiculous. Even in cordless, it seems like Shark's doing better now. So, which is kind of crazy, because I feel like Dysons have gotten a lot better since this era, and Sharks have gotten a lot worse. So this was back in the era when you had some real good machines, and this was in the era when a Shark would actually out-clean a Dyson. This compared to a DC-14, yeah, this would clean better. So it makes sense. It's such a shame, because this is honestly a really nice little machine. Yeah, the tools, and they're not perfect, but especially on carpets where the narrow design doesn't really hurt, because you're not, if you're using it on carpets, you don't really care about how narrow it is. It's actually quite a nice machine. So yeah, kind of a somber ending to the original Navigator NV22. And let's see, is there a date code on this? I don't think there is a date code on this. I think there is on the side, actually. They're out on the back. So there's the information. Model NV22L. Yep. I don't see any type of date code on it. Although, actually, I think these usually have date codes on the plugs, don't they? So let's check that plug and see. Let's see if there's a date code on here. Probably not. Pac-Man. Why is there a Pac-Man on the plug? That's cute. No date code, though, so I'm not really sure how to serial date this, which isn't exactly relevant to the review. I just want to know. E124162. There's no way this was 2012. They didn't sell this that long. I don't know. But yeah, so that's the Shark Navigator NV22L, the best Shark they ever made before it leaves the collection. Again, I was kind of hoping this is the last Shark that I would sell. I was hoping this would be the last one that I'd be stuck with, but I've got all the crappy dual clean ones. And so this is the only Shark that I have / had that doesn't have dual clean, so which makes it a much better machine for carpets. Anyways, Intelitech Studios signing out. I'm blanking on the name because I believe it was a vacuum YouTuber who bought this, but I can't remember. I apologize for forgetting your name if you're watching this, but I will link that person's channel in the description, and I'm sure that they'll do an unboxing video on this machine when it arrives. So yeah, my next task is finding a box for this thing, because frankly I should have did that 2 days ago. Oops. Yeah, I'm not the best at shipping things fast. I apologize, but this will get out on Monday. So anyways, Shark Navigator, NV22L, cat, and Teletech Studios signing out. So let me know your thoughts on the Shark Navigator NV22L in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope you all have a good one. Peace. And I'm going to empty this and clean this out before I ship it, of course, so it's not all dirty. But yeah, those hoses, though, those are staying. Those aren't coming up, unfortunately. It's just kind of part of these. Translucent hoses, yeah, not a great idea, but unfortunately the entire industry's latched onto it for the most part. Although, newer Sharks don't. That is one improvement newer Sharks have. A lot of the hoses are black. So yeah. This isn't black. This is orange. You can tell because he has no brain. Orange, orange, orange. He's so orange.